Hello and welcome to the Fighting Spirit Podcast. As always, I'm Jason. I'm here to bring us the retrospective for Overeem versus Volkov, and we're going to look ahead for the fight picks for UFC 258, where Kamaru, the Nigerian Nightmare Usman, is taking on Gilbert Durinho Burns. And we got some firefights to talk about in that one, but let's first talk about how we did this past weekend. We went 8-4 overall, so 2/3 accuracy, 66.67%, and nailing 2 out of 1 on the Patreon, landing in the money with our dog Marquez and our favorite Volkov, but missing Fajeda via split decision. But let's talk about the card. Let's get into it. Here's the show. All right, let's start out with the main event here. In this one here, it was just a classic heavyweight affair. Big strikes landing in the case of Volkov. A couple decent strikes landing for Overeem, but he was outstruck like mad, 54-10. And realistically, Overeem was just totally outmatched in this one, showing the miles on the chin, the miles on the lifespan. I mean, the guy's now in his 40s, and he was just going up against a guy in his prime in Volkov that could not be denied victory on Saturday. It was a great fight by him. I'm really looking forward to see what Volkov can do in the heavyweight division. He did have that weird derailment, that fluke loss against Derek Lewis where he was dominating, but he's been back ever since, and I think he could potentially make a run up the ladder here. We'll see how things play out, though, but we did get that one correct, and he netted us some cash on the Patreon picks. In the next one, our co-main, this was probably going to be fight of the night, in my opinion, and earn performance of the night money along with Volkov and Dariush and Fajeda for fight of the night money. But what can we really say about this fight? If you haven't seen it, you can go back and watch it, I'm sure, even via GIF. We have Frankie Edgar come out. He looks okay to start. Obviously, Sandhagen has that giant reach advantage, has that giant frame advantage, and well, Edgar's never able to get a hold of a leg, but he is looking for takedowns, grabbing at him, and Corey Sandhagen times it perfectly to set up for the flying knee, shutting the lights out on Edgar even before he hits the mat. I mean, it's a toe curling KO. It's a little bit chilling if you actually go back and watch it, or if you saw it live, it'll take your breath away. It was that devastating. It's one of the knockouts of the year, and it's only February, so let's see what the year has in hold for us. But Corey Sandhagen is a phenomenal product. He's going to be getting a title shot. He called for it. I think he's going to be the fight to make. I do not believe he's going to have to go through Dillashaw on his way back up. I think, honestly, Dillashaw is going to have to fight somebody that isn't as hot right now as Sandhagen, and Sandhagen is going to be fighting the winner of Jan versus Sterling. Whether it's going to be against Jan for a first time with them or a way to run it back against Sterling, we'll see what happens there. But it was a solid pick for us, and it was a solid win for Sandhagen. In the next one, this one was pretty fun. We had Clay Guida taking on Michael Johnson. And this one here was classic Clay Guida. He went out there, he brawled, he kept his head low, picked up takedowns, 3 on the night, and he ultimately outdid Johnson, who did actually outstrike Guida, but he was just spending too much time on his butt, too much time against the cage, and Clay Guida made it his style of fight where he was able to take advantage of the situation, even going for a submission attempt. So, what's next for these guys? It's hard to say. I don't think Clay Guida is done just yet, but Michael Johnson could be. He's riding a pretty heavy losing streak right now. Let's take a quick look at it. Yeah, 4 losses in a row. It's hard to say what will happen for this guy. He's still, I think, liked by Dana White, so we could see him come back, but he is kind of getting to the end here. And I think, honestly, we could see him looking at Bellator or some other organization in the near future because he is not performing very well in the UFC. But we'll see what happens with him. And obviously, Clay Guida will continue to fight Father Time in there and put on solid performances when asked to do so. But we did get that one correct as well. All right, moving on to the next one here. We have Pantoja taking on Manel Kape. And in this one here, we did get this one correct with Pantoja picking up a solid victory for us. Manel Kape, he looked good. He's coming out of a lot of wins out of the Ryzen organization, but he looked really wasteful with his energy. He was moving around a lot. He was throwing a lot of feints, but not making much action. And Pantoja was able to capitalize by outstriking this guy 74-49. Granted, he was taken down twice, Pantoja was. However, he did not let Kape do any damage to him. He got back to his feet pretty easily and kept this thing mostly a standing fight where he was able to throw combinations and take advantage of Kape's lack of decision, lack of action in there. A lot of feints, a lot of wasted energy. I think this kid can definitely come back and improve, but he's got to pull the trigger. He cannot seem as hesitant in there. Pantoja was not biting at it, and he had to change the style, especially going to that third round. But this kid does look like a solid prospect, and I am looking forward to seeing him come back in the next one. All right, this next one here was a tough loss for us. It was a split decision loss. It honestly even could have been a draw, but really I think Dariush just outdid Fajeda here, and really it's the story of takedowns. When it came to striking, I thought Fajeda actually did the better damage. You could see that Fajeda wasn't really wearing much damage, but Dariush looked like he was in a car wreck, and that's because he was the cleaner striker, but he did not have enough time to stay on his feet. Every time there was a decent exchange, Dariush went right back to the ground game and held Fajeda down. Now, that's not to totally discount Fajeda, though. The guy's BJJ skills were on display in the first round, but they started to dwindle. He was not able to chain the submissions together. He was not able to keep the rhythm and pace, and eventually Dariush did wear on him in the ground. But Fajeda did look competitive for at least the first round, and it was kind of a toss-up for who won round 2 and 3. No, actually, I think 2 was actually definitively Dariush. Round 3 was a little more questionable, but it was a close fight no matter how you look at it, and I can't argue with the decision here. It was a Patreon pick for us, so we got this one incorrect, but Dariush picks up a win. This is one of the fights that I didn't want to see either guy lose, if I'm honest, and, well, hey, it had to be one of them, so ended up being Fajeda with the loss. All right, moving on to the next one. We got correct. This was dog money for us. Daniel Marquez defeats Mike Slow Rodriguez. So the story here, again, is takedowns. Rodriguez striking looked okay, but Marquez was able to score some solid ground and pound, some decent striking of his own, and just work this thing on the mat. I mean, when he had Mike Rodriguez up against the cage in the second round, he was just going for that rear naked choke, would not give up. I mean, he was getting tips from Lozon. Lozon was in his corner, giving him good, solid, not panicky tips. He was trying to keep the guy relaxed, but he couldn't take advantage of his cornerman, and he ultimately ended up picking up a loss via rear naked choke. But we did, like I said, get this one correct. It was dog money for us, and I was happy to make that call. And the next one we got correct as well. Devontae Smith defeats Justin Janes. This one's pretty straightforward. We got a solid knockout out of Janes. Out of Smith. Sorry about that. We saw a knockout coming out of Smith. He outstrikes him 34-11, scores a takedown, and knocks him out midway through round number 2 to pick up a solid victory. In the next one, we did get incorrect. Carol Rosa defeats Jocelyn Edwards. Edwards looked effective on the feet. This was a similar story where we had Fajeda and Dariush. We had Edwards looking really good on the feet, but she could not overcome the takedowns, doesn't have enough experience in the MMA game yet, and Rosa was able to take her down and keep her there all night, picking up 4 takedowns on the night, outstriking her 57-38, and picking up a good win. We'll see Jocelyn Edwards back. She's definitely not done. Got to work on that takedown defense, and she will bounce right back in this one for sure. And the next one we got wrong as well, and a kind of a shocking turn of events. Molly McCann is totally outdone by Laura Principio, and again, tail of the tape here is takedowns. 7 takedowns to McCann's 0, although McCann did almost pick up an armbar for the win. It was really close, but that would have been her only pathway to victory because she was basically just outworked all night, and I didn't like McCann's style. It seemed like she was playing into it. She seemed like her ego got in the way. She was not able to play her fights where I think she would have tried to keep the distance a little bit more, but hey, it is what it is. Principio has her style of match and picks up a phenomenal victory. And the next one we did get correct. Again, Sungwoo Choi defeats Yusuf Dalal. Solid fight, unanimous decision. Not too much to really talk about here. Not a lot of strikes thrown, not many landed. Dalal did pick up more takedowns, which I think the ground game was going to be a problem, but Choi managed to stay standing enough, even picking up some takedowns of his own, outstriking Dalal 41-23 on his way to a unanimous victory. And then the last two here, Timur Valiev does defeat Martin Day. We had called Day in this one, but with that late notice, it just didn't work out for the Hawaiian, and Valiev puts on a takedown clinic, scoring 4 and outstriking him 55-8 over 15 minutes. And then the last one, Odi Osborne, it's a walk-off knockout. Odi Osborne throws 5 strikes, knocks him out 26 seconds in, and just picks up a phenomenal victory. Probably should have got a little bit of a payday bonus for that one, but hey, he gets gypped out of $50K, but I'm sure he'll be back very, very soon. So like I said, we had a solid performance, 8-4 overall. We missed Day, McCann, Edwards, and Fajeda, but nailed the rest of them, went 2-1 to land in the money for Patreon, getting our dog Marquez and our favorite Volkov, and missing Fajeda by a narrow margin. But hey, that's all in the past. We made a little money. We got to make a little bit more. Let's take a look at UFC 258. All right, I think we need to talk about this card on a whole, or as a whole first, and that is the fact that I don't know if this card is actually worth what the UFC is asking for it. I want to see Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns, but do I want to pay for the 4 other fights that are on here? That's going to be Barber and Grasso. That's not a great co-main. I don't know why they're not moving Gastelum, Heinich up just for, the co-main headlining ability of it all. But anyways, Macy Barber, Alexa Grasso, okay fight. Maybe on the prelims, maybe early to open up the pay-per-view, but not quite pay-per-view co-mainer. Gastelum Heinich is a good fight, and so is Pedro Munoz versus Jimmy Rivera, but these are fight fans fights. This is not a great selling point. I mean, maybe they're trying to prove a point, that maybe Usman can move numbers on his own, that Burns can move numbers on his own, but when you're on a card with, Munoz, Jimmy Rivera, Kelvin Gastelum, and Maki Pitolo versus Julian Marquez, those are your 5 fights for the pay-per-view, and they are questionable at best. Now, bear in mind, they just added Andre Uhl, Chris Gutierrez to this card. I don't know where they're going to slot them, but even if they moved it up to the pay-per-view, it would not justify, I think, $70 for this one. So really, when you're thinking about buying this fight, you say, is Usman versus Burns worth $70? I think it almost is. It's real close. It's a tough one. If you're sitting at home and thinking about it, you're really probably going to have to get hyped up by the preliminary card to want to buy this one. But let's talk about the fights here, because that's why we're here, right? And in this one here, we have Usman taking on Burns. And I was talking about this with my buddy Eric earlier today. And basically for me, now minus my pick, I like Burns here, okay? I like his style. I think styles make fights here, and I do not think Usman's going to be able to use his safe tactics to get a win here, okay? Now, with that also being said, Burns is also my pick officially on the numbers, and I don't think he's going to be able to use those safe tactics Usman will against Burns. So the cage grinding, I think that's out here. I think Burns is going to welcome the clinch, welcome the grappling, and so Burns is, going to be too much of a threat there for Usman to exploit that part of his game, which leaves him in an open striking affair with Burns, which is tough because we've seen great knockout power out of Burns, and honestly, all we've seen out of Usman, with the exception of the war with Colby, is really just a decision machine for him. Now, he has a great record due to 17-1. He deserves a lot of accolades, but he's a safe champion, and he's going to be dragged into a dogfight with Burns, who has the ability to shut down his safe style of grinding on the cage and scoring takedowns to cement rounds like he did against Tyron Woodley. So this is going to be an interesting matchup, and I think has the ability to be a firefight because Burns is going to bring the fight to Usman, and Usman's going to have to prove he's actually a Nigerian nightmare just to compete in this one. So when I look at the numbers, they speak to Burns. It's a fairly narrow margin, but I think the stylistic matchup here is going to make it very difficult for Usman to use what he's leaned on the last couple of fights that he's had. When it came to Masvidal, he shut down the striking, knew he could beat him on the cage, and grappled his way to victory. He had to take some shots to, get a hold of him, but he was able to do that every time. George Masvidal is not a threat there, okay? We did the same thing to Woodley. We thought Woodley could be a threat there, but he overcame that. And then obviously Covington would have been a threat with the grappling, with the wrestling, draining the gas tank. So he decided not to go there. And I think we're looking at a similar situation with Burns. So if you thought Covington versus Usman was worth $70, Gilbert Burns versus Usman is probably also worth it, so take that as you will. And I think we're going to have a new 170-pound champion, which is going to be better for the division anyways because Burns is dangerous everywhere. Usman only has 2 finishes in the last 3 years, Sergio Moraes and Colby Covington. When you look over at Gilbert Burns, yeah, he has 2 more losses than Usman, but he does have a higher finish rate. Granted, it hasn't come out as much recently, but with his great knockout over Damian Maia, we can see that he does have the ability to finish these things. He does have the ability to make this division, I think, a little more exciting, and we'll see what the future holds on Saturday, but I'm calling it now. We got our new welterweight champion, and his name is Gilbert Durinho Burns. All right, we're going to move on to that co-main here, and that is going to be Macy Barber versus Alexa Grasso. Kind of a tough one to sell at co-main, but I already kind of talked about that, so let's move on here. I think that our Mexican fighter in Alexa Grasso is going to exploit and defeat this really inexperienced 22-year-old Macy Barber. Now, Alexa Grasso is right in the prime of her life, 27 years old, and one huge factor here, this is part of the reason I'm picking her in my gut as well, is because we have seen Macy Barber come off a huge injury. In her fight against Roxanne Modafferi, she tore her ACL. We have no idea what she's going to be like when she bounces back here. She tore this thing only about a year ago, so that's about the length of rehab for this thing, and we don't know how effective she will be. Is she going to trust her knee? Does she have ring rust? There's a lot of things up in the air here. And when we look over at Grasso, she's staying more active, has a win back in August 29th of this year. She has the time in the cage. She's got a little more experience. She's in a little bit better prime of her life. I think we got to go with the Mexican here. We got to go with Grasso. She's the pick on Saturday. All right, this next one here is probably one of the better fights on the card if you are buying it, and that's going to be Kelvin Gastelum versus Ian Heinisch. Both these guys are looking really good recently. However, Gastelum, well, let's knock it back for a second, because Gastelum has looked okay, but really since his war with Israel Adesanya, he has not been the same guy. He obviously lost that one. That was what it was. And then he went on, took on Darren Till. Darren Till in that one, it was a split decision. It was close. And then he got the heel hook, lost to Hermanson, which was just tragic. So even though he has lost recently, he still looked pretty decent. And I think the numbers for him are off because of that. And for the fact of the matter is, because of his recent performances, his numbers have slid, and Ian Heinisch is the predicted winner in this one. Now, Heinisch has proven he's fighting at a pretty high level recently, good enough to hang, I think, with Gastelum, but his is not all sunshine and puppy bears. He beat Gerald Meerschaert, knocked him out, spectacular win, minute 14 seconds, but he did lose to Derek Brunson, and he did lose to Omari Khmedov, two guys at the top of the 185-pound table. So when you look at these guys, I think we're probably a little bit overweight on Heinisch and a little underweight on Gastelum. I think Gastelum can come out here and bring the heat. We'll see what's going on, though. I watched him in the embedded. He's mostly training at home. He's got his girlfriend as a nutritionist and trainer. I find the relationship there a little bit questionable when you're having romantic involvings with a trainer. I'm not a pro athlete. I don't know what that's about, but I don't like that look here. And again, I'm going to stick with the numbers as always, like I do. And we're going to take Heinisch in this one because that's who we believe is going to win. But Gastelum has proven he's a great product, so don't count that guy out ever. But, well, count him out if he fights at 170 and goes through a buffet. But besides that, he's definitely not one to count out. Either way, taking Heinisch. All right, moving on to the next one here. A great fight I am looking forward to. Jimmy Rivera taking on Pedro Munoz. So Pedro Munoz, this guy has fought some of the best at 135 pounds, and he's beaten some of them and lost to the others. Knocked out Cody Garbrandt in spectacular fashion, probably made his stock rise a little too high, and was defeated by Aljamain Sterling and defeated by Frankie Edgar in his 135-pound debut. And now he finds himself up against a Tiger Schulman product in Jimmy Rivera, a guy that probably brings the heat a little too hard. Reminds me a lot of, oh man, what is his name? Trains over at Alliance. Jeremy Stevens, actually. So he reminds me of that guy. He puts a lot into his punches. He lays it all on the line. It's exciting, but I think he leaves himself a little too exposed, causing him to sometimes eat a really big shot. Now, will Munoz be able to make him eat a knuckle sandwich like what happened with Cody? I don't know if it's going to be a brawl that way, but I honestly believe that Munoz doesn't have lightning in a bottle again to exploit another outing like Garbrandt, and so I'm going to stick with Rivera in this one. I do not think that he's going to catch a big counter shot. I think that Rivera will ultimately be able to bring the heat, but there always is that risk there that this guy can get caught with a good shot. Pedro's proved that he can do it before. However, the numbers still point towards Rivera. He's the pick on Saturday. All right, the next one here, we're going to have veteran Jim A10 Miller going up against a guy I think is stocked a little too high, honestly, in King Bobby Green. So a lot of guys are high on Bobby Green. He's basically Bobby Green, the decision machine, if I got to be perfectly honest. The guy has not had a finish since 2013. Just keep that in mind. I know a lot of people ride high on King Bobby Green. Dude has not knocked anybody out since 2013 when he knocked out James Krause. He's been knocked out by Dustin Poirier. So he's been on the side of a finish, if you will, but he has not found a stoppage since that time. And Miller finds stoppages, okay? This guy mostly finds them via submission, but he finds them, and I think that aggression, that fight IQ, that veteran tenacity is going to be a bit much for Bobby Green to deal with. Now, Bobby Green's fought vets before. You know, he's fought guys like Clay Guida, Thiago Moises. He's fought guys that have been here before. Okay, maybe I'm overselling Moises. His record's not that deep. But definitely in Clay Guida for sure. And I think he struggled with both those guys despite him end up getting the win over Guida. I think he's going to have a hard time defeating Jim A10 Miller, and I think Miller's going to get it done here. He has the submission ability. Granted, the striking department for him is not as strong, so Green could maybe exploit that, I think, with his decent-sized frame. However, I think this thing can go to the mat. I think Jim Miller can force it there and make it his contest. We're going with Jim Miller. All right, the next one here, this one was added today. It's Chris Gutierrez versus Andre Ewell. And in this one here, I like Gutierrez. Nothing against Ewell here, but I think Gutierrez brings a higher viciousness to the game. I think that the Latin heat gets going in him, and he does look to shut the door. He's got great knockout rate, 7 KOs over his 15 wins. Now, it's not to say Ewell doesn't have any KO power himself. 7 KOs over 17 wins, but a little lower rate, obviously. And we've seen Guapo perform, I think, a little bit better recently. Granted, it was a draw against Cody Durden, but he had, via leg kicks, taken out Vince Morales. And I think those leg kicks are going to be there in the Ewell fight, who has these nice, lanky, long legs, who are going to be primed for kicking. And with Ewell struggling to pick up victories, I don't know what his confidence level is like. That's another thing to take into consideration. He's getting wins, but he's just squeaking by. Whereas I think Chris Gutierrez is looking to avenge that thing like kissing your sister. It just doesn't feel right. A draw in MMA. He's going to avenge that one. He's going to get a win on Saturday. All right, the next one here I think is honestly upset city if it goes any other way. But we have Anthony Hernandez taking on Rodolfo Vieira. This one is a Vieira all day. I mean, this guy is not the black belt hunter for nothing. He is a phenomenal world jiu-jitsu champion. He's coming to MMA. He has 1 knockout, so he has a little power in the hands. He's 1-6. This thing's never gone to decision, and Vegas knows it because he's minus 400. This guy is pretty much lock of the evening. Trains over Fusion XL. Trains with Jacare. I mean, this guy is super high-level jiu-jitsu, so we got 2 guys that are super high-level. We got him and Rodolfo. We got Burns up at the top in the main, and this is just going to be 2 great grappling specialists on display. There's not much else to say. Rodolfo's a lock. Go out and put your money on it. All right, the next one here, we have Bilal, member of the name Muhammad, taking on Diego Lima. And in this one here, I'm going with remember the name because I remember Diego Lima is not Douglas Lima, and Diego is in the shadow of his brother. Okay, Bilal Muhammad is a phenomenal athlete. Granted, he does get a lot of decisions, but I think that's going to work to his advantage here. He defeated Chris Millinder and Lyman Good recently via decision, and did actually pick up a submission victory against Takashi Sato. We go over and look over at Diego Lima. He's looking good too, but he's squeaking by. He's getting decisions, split decisions at that. Luke Jamu, Court McGee. He did get a knockout over Chad Laprise, but I don't think it's going to be enough here. Bilal Muhammad is too good, and Diego does not possess the attributes of his brother over in Bellator. So we're sticking with Bilal Muhammad. He's going to be the name to remember on Saturday. All right, moving on to the next one here. We have 2 relatively newcomers here, Mallory Martin and Polyana Viana. And in this one here, I like Viana just a little bit more. I like the Brazilian fighter here. She has what seems to be the slightly better ground game here, slightly better grappling game, if you will. 7 submissions over 11 wins. Still possesses power in the hands. She's in her prime. She's coming off of a great armbar victory over Emily Whitmire, breaking a 3-fight losing streak. And the fact of the matter is, Martin is just not a proven product yet in the UFC. Yeah, she trains over at Elevation Fight Team. She's got a great camp behind her. She's in her prime as well. But at just 7-3, I don't think she has enough fights really in the game yet. Granted, Vienna's 11-4, so it's not much of a difference. But it's enough here. She hasn't spent enough time under the big bright lights. She only has a couple fights in Invicta before this, a little bit at LFA. She's bounced around. This will be her 3rd fight in the UFC, and I do not expect her to go her way. Pollyanna's the call on Saturday. All right, this next one here should be straightforward, but it ain't. And that's going to be Ricky Simone and Brian Boom Kelleher. Boom Kelleher is surprising people left and right because he went out and defeated Ray Rodriguez, a guy he was not supposed to beat. He went out and beat Hunter Azure and Odie Osborne, guys he was not supposed to beat. Kelleher is supposed to be a 22-11 journeyman, and he somehow picks up wins. Granted, he was taken down and grappled to death, basically wrestle-fucked by Cody Stamann. However, I don't know if Ricky Simone's going to be able to do that here. Now, he's still the call, but this guy has struggled against guys that we thought he was going to run through. Guys like Rob Font and Uriah Faber. Back when this guy was on his big winning streak, he was supposed to beat the goddamn crap out of Uriah Faber, and he just struggled to get it done, getting knocked out 40 seconds into the fight, and that was back in his mullet days. He's since cut the mullet. He's somehow refound himself, and he got the win over Ray Borg and Giantano Piorello. So, hey, I don't know. This is a tough one to call. Kelleher, it seems to be an upset machine. He's supposed to be a journeyman, but he's not acting like it. And Simone, it looked like one of the hottest products, 135 pounds, but got derailed a little while back and could be back. Who knows? Hard to say. Sticking with Simone, though. I hope he comes out with a mullet, because that would be my preferred version of him. Either way, Ricky Simone on Saturday. All right, this next one here is pretty much a debut, so I don't have too much to say. I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass on this one. We got one guy, actually it is a debut, Dana White Contender Series. We got some numbers out of there for Philip Rowe. We have Gabriel Green, who lost at his debut in the UFC. But, you know, for what it's worth, I'm going to go with the numbers we got out of Dana White, and that gives us Philip Rowe. He's the pick on Saturday in that one. Let's move on to the last one here. That one is just too quick to talk about, and that's going to be Jillian Robertson taking on a very new up-and-comer in Miranda Maverick. Maverick's got just the one fight in the UFC. Granted, she did look good and has some grappling talent, and in her UFC debut, she did pick up a knockout. However, I think this is going to come down to mostly a grappling affair, with Robertson also having a very high American top team grappling pedigree. And in this one here, I think the more experienced Jillian Robertson is going to be able to get this one done here. She is coming off a loss to Talia Santos. She wants to avenge that, and I think she's going to be able to go in and strangle Miranda Maverick. I think she's going to defeat the overconfident Miranda Maverick. I think she's going to show her that why she belongs in the UFC, and Maverick's just too early into this game, and I think that Robertson goes out and makes a statement against this 23-year-old on Saturday. So let's go over them one more time. We have Burns, Grasso, Heinich, Rivera, Marquez, Miller, Vieira, Muhammad, Viana, Simone, Rowe, Robertson, and Gutierrez to round things out. All right, so if you'd like to reach out to the Fighting Spirit Podcast, you can get in touch at fightingspiritpodcast@gmail.com. You can also reach out to me on Twitter at MMAFightPick01, and if you'd like to support the Fighting Spirit Podcast, a financial amount that makes the most sense to you, head on over to Patreon in the link down below, and please go ahead and support the show. We get those fight picks out there. We're still doing the liquor reviews. The beer reviews are coming out once a month. They're exclusive there, and I think there's some good content for some good value, and of course you can always converse with me and have all the fun there too. So I do look forward to that. Please write, please leave me some comments. Hey, whatever, man. I am looking forward to hearing from you. All right, enough desperation. Let's close this out. So until I speak with you again next time on the retrospective for UFC 258, happy fight picking.